Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Kevin Nealon. Our top story tonight, it appears congratulations are in order. We are monitoring things closely as details continue to come in, but it seems, yes, I have confirmation. We're talking about you, Joseph. Congratulations. You really outdid yourself this time, which probably wasn't that hard. Our team has discovered footage from one of the many celebrations taking place in your honor. Stay away from drugs, kids. Now for some deeper analysis, let's go live via satellite to our special guest commentator, Other Kevin. Other Kevin, what are your thoughts on all this? Speechless, Kevin. Wow. Just wow. Insightful as always. Thank you. Well, I'm now being told that we are out of time and that I should pull this lever. I'm Kevin Nealon. Thanks for watching. Take care, Jimmy. Thanks, Bob.
Joseph Jaffe is not famous. I'm kind of famous. I'm Jerry Springer. And Jaffe is no host. He'd be lucky to be in my audience, let alone on my show. Well, maybe he's crazy enough to be on my show. I take that back. And that's not a good thing.
Am I being overconfident? Am I becoming complacent about complacency?
I think you are.
Oh, he's not the Messiah. He's just a very naughty boy.
Yeah, I've got big ears.
Brian doesn't want to see anyone else. Piss off.
That's the one. Because you literally complete me. And we complete each other.
You've obviously encountered discrimination in your own life by virtue of being Australian.
Hey, Manuel Kemp was a real pissant who was very rarely stable.
I don't want to get too gushy, but I might just be saying you complete me, Dean. P&G now stands for Pritchard and Good.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How
insane!
Did I do that?
You're insane!
Well, let me get your attention, please, which is actually the soliloquy title as well. I am excited. I am thrilled because there are not many books that got my attention. The puns will eventually subside. But one of them was The Experience Economy, written by Joe Pine. I've had him on the show. The other was written by Tom Davenport, called The Attention Economy. And I have Tom on the show today. I'm excited to talk to him about that. And he said, well, we can talk about that, but I also want to talk about AI, and he's got a new book out. He's written a bunch of them. I've got a lot of catching up to do. You know, we've got ChatGPT. I can just get the bot to write an entire sequence, an entire library of books written in the South African style of Joseph Jaffe. I have my copy of The Attention Economy here, and I don't know, maybe I'll figure out a way for Tom to sign it if he so chooses. And, you know, if he needs another book, I can see all the books in the background in the green room. Maybe I'll even send him one of my eloquent books, like Built to Suck, The Inevitable Demise of the Corporation, and How to Save It with a Question Mark. But enough about me. Let's talk about you, Tom. I'm going to be bringing him on the show very soon. But I just want to talk a little bit about it, and then we'll get back to Tom indirectly as well. As many of you know, I have a little virtual coffee that I hold every single weekday morning. We haven't missed one since August, which takes some doing, let me tell you. If you want to join us for virtual coffee, I actually have my coffee cup in my hand at the moment. You can have some real coffee while you partake in virtual coffee in discord.gg/alpha collective. We do this every single day, every weekday. And if you can't make it, you can actually subscribe to the pod version of it. And you can do that at bit.ly/collective cafe to go. Now, this morning, we actually had a really, really nice session on a live read, which we typically do on Thursdays, on the attention economy. And I learned about what was it, the psychobiology, or was it the biopsychology? No, the psychobiology of attention. It really helps when you understand both the art and the science, but more on that later. Actually, while I was in South by Southwest now in Austin, what got my attention was this activation for a new show on Peacock called Mrs. Davis. And there were a whole bunch of nuns running around, walking around, I guess. I'm just looking for my wings. I think I lost them as well. They were somewhere here a second ago, and now they're gone. But if you actually spotted these nuns, you could actually earn your wings, and I did that. There is me with my nuns earning my wings. And in fact, if you look very carefully, you can see the wings are on me as well. Now, in terms of influencer marketing, I've gone ahead and I'm talking about it right now. I spoke about it this morning. I'm posting it on all my social media profiles. And guess what? I might even watch it as well. So that's what happens in today's hurly-burly, difficult, challenging, volatile, VUCA world. It really does take a bit of a village in order to get attention and to keep attention and to turn attention into intention and ultimately some kind of a sale. And that's why today's soliloquy is called Attention Please. I don't know if you've heard this, but apparently, maybe Tom can dispel this. They say that the average human's attention span is now less than a goldfish. That a goldfish is 8 seconds, has an 8-second attention span, and we have a 7-second attention span. I guess the difference between us and goldfish is that a goldfish completely forgets everything, I guess, in 8 seconds. And I mean, sometimes if you ask my wife, I forget everything. But that's another story for another day. Why I am so intrigued to have this discussion is the fact that it is 2023. This book, the book, The Attention Economy, was written in 2001, if I read correctly. So think about the world then and the world now. That's something I'm going to ask Tom as well. What has changed? Could he have foreseen the way the world was changing and how it would change and what it would take to get attention, to keep attention, and as I was saying, to turn attention into intention and ultimately action or even execution? Now, Tom talks a lot about in the book also about employees, how to engage people. And something that I've often said, which is the real enemy today, is apathy and indifference. It's somebody just not giving a damn, not caring, not having an opinion, being completely or meh to you, to your offering, to your value proposition, to your point of differentiation. One thing we actually read about today, which I loved, was, and all of that is in the podcast if you actually want to go and listen to it, was it is easier to stand out being different in a sea of normality. I'm doing a bit of editorial license. Than it is to be normal in a sea of, shall we say, abnormality or chaos. I really like that as well. It does encourage us as parents, as individuals, to not be afraid to stand out as opposed to blend in. And surely the one thing we do very, very well, and by well, I don't mean well at all, I mean poorly, is in this vanilla world of social media, all we do and all our children do is attempt to blend in, not to stick out. And that is an absolute travesty when we think of the power of individuality. And, it's something that I think segues beautifully into a discussion on AI because ultimately we have to ask ourselves the question, how do we, the humans, stand out? How do we take on the robots, the machines? How do we compete? Maybe, just maybe, the answer lies not in being perfect, but as something I've said many times before, being perfectly imperfect. And more on that soon. But now it's time for Tom Davenport. Tom Davenport is a distinguished professor of information technology and management at Babson College, visiting professor at Oxford Business School, fellow of the MIT Digital Economy Initiative, and senior advisor to Deloitte's AI practice. He's published 23 books and over 300 articles for Harvard Business Review and many other publications. He has been amongst the world's top 25 consultants, the top 3 business technology analysts, the 100 most influential people in the IT industry, and the top 50 business school professors in the world. He's worked with many of the world's leading companies on data, analytics, and AI strategies. Let's bring him onto the show. Mr. Tom Davenport, distinguished professor, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joseph. Happy to be with you. You're a very attention-getting guy. So.
Oh, thank you. But hopefully for all, well, as I say to my students, I'm an adjunct at NYU, and also, which is, it's very easy to get attention. The naked cowboys taught us that in Times Square. But what you do with that attention is important.
Yes, I'm not sure he's really converted it into anything terribly useful in most cases.
He hasn't brought out his NFT yet, so I'm sure that's in the pipeline. Tom, I did a couple of as I said, there would be a few little surprises along the way. But one of the things we do is we all know that you are a distinguished professor, and let me ask you, what does it take? I know what a distinguished gentleman is, which I'm sure you are too. But how does one become distinguished as a professor?
I think they just throw flattering titles at you to get you to take the job, basically. I don't know that it's not a formally recognized title in many academic environments. They just told me, if you want to come to Babson, you can be a distinguished professor and get this chair and so on. I was actually the president's distinguished professor, which, I don't know if that's Joe Biden or Donald Trump's distinguished professor, but I think that meant at the time they didn't have enough money to fund my chair, so the president was going to take it out of his own pocket or something like that.
Yeah, now that is very impressive, and I can actually see the chair behind you. That's also that's also impressive. Whether it was Trump or Biden, maybe we'll ask ChatGPT to tell us exactly which one it was. But so we know you as a distinguished professor, but your fans, and I know that professors have fans. I remember very well being one of the 2 keynotes in Caracas, Venezuela, with one of my heroes, Professor Philip Kotler.
I know Phil quite well.
And we've met a few times. He's been on the show. He actually came on my 50th birthday show a few years ago. And I've never seen people go so crazy. And might I add, young ladies as well, maybe especially. When I say young, not that young. But he really had adoring fans. And I think they brushed right past me in order to get a signed copy of his book.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He doesn't initially come across as having a lot of sex appeal, but it is amazing what a following he has. And by the way, he and I were both neighbors in Sarasota, as was Jerry Springer, by the way. I used to see him in Starbucks all the time.
Wow. Well, first of all, I'll bet that I did not. Well, I'll tell you, I did not expect you to use the word sex appeal and Philip Kotler in the same sentence. But as I said, we go from the sublime to the ridiculous, back to the sublime, and you know what, back to the ridiculous, because we sent our reporters into the field to find out about what powers a distinguished Professor. And what we found out, the shock of it all, is that you once won a jalapeno pepper eating contest, 18 of them in 30 seconds. Now, that is impressive.
It's true. I think I will put that on my tombstone as my greatest achievement in life. So.
Well, listen, eating 18 in 30 seconds could have actually accelerated your demise to your tombstone. Were they hot at all? Were they, how hot were they? It sounds like a joke.
You know, jalapenos, at the time, everybody thought that they were the hottest pepper you can get, but now we know they're only moderate on the hotness scale. So it wasn't that bad. It did cause a little bit of gastric distress eventually, as I recall, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah, no kidding. So it's like kind of man versus food. It was professor versus food. And now I've also been personally a little fascinated. I think they call it, I don't know, BTUs, or they've got their own reading in terms of hotness. And I would tell you one more thing as well, which is I found out actually the hard way. I went into a restaurant, and of course they had all different types of wings. You know, they had buffalo, they had barbecue, and then they had one called Angel of Death, which of course I tried. I made it through half a wing. I couldn't feel, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel my lips. I was crying my eyes out. Here's a fun fact. Do you know what helps in that situation?
Not water. I know that. I think, don't they say bread is good?
I wouldn't know, but I'll tell you what worked for me, what the owner of the restaurant, chilled vodka. Instant.
I haven't tried that. Yeah.
Instant. And then of course I proceeded to try the other half of the wing, only because I wanted more vodka. Now we found that
vodka helps with a lot of problems, I have found.
That's true, and it's back to the gut. Now we found out something as well, getting a little bit more into your experience in the teaching. By the way, this Miss McGann is all over. When you search for Harvard rejection letters, she has got, I don't know, a lock on all the search engine optimization. But as it turns out, you've been accepted or hired by Harvard 5 times and rejected 4 times. There's definitely a story in that, but also there's got to be a lesson about resilience, perseverance, grit, determination, and ultimately endurance.
I suppose so. The first time was when I applied there for graduate school, for the PhD program, and I was rejected. And it may have had something to do with the fact that a couple of weeks later, I got a National Science Foundation scholarship that pays for all of my, tuition and many of my living expenses. But I wrote them back and I said, hey, why'd you reject me? I'm a good guy. And by the way, I now have this NSF fellowship. And they wrote me back and said, okay, you can come. So I'd like to think they just recognized what an outstanding applicant I was, and not that they wouldn't have to pay anything to keep me there. But
it's interesting though, because there's I think this idea of well, first of all, it is Harvard, so there's that. But so many times I think we can take things personally, and there's pride, and instead of just putting our head down, moving on, and then in this case, going straight back to them with a little bit more of, I would say, a proof of concept or credential that then opened up the door. I'm sure all the time you're encountering students that are finding and struggling in today's times. Coming out of Harvard with their degrees, or coming out of Babson with their degrees, and not finding a job. What do you say to them? What can you teach them in terms of perseverance, and in terms of even the concept of, to segue into the attention economy, getting a recruiter's or getting someone's attention?
Well, I think that's become a much bigger issue now than it used to be, and you really have to sort of package yourself. I mean, when my kids were applying to college, I realized this is really a packaging exercise. And we all now need to think of ourselves as how do we package and brand ourselves so that we'll stand out and form a distinct impression that is appealing to the the reader, the viewer, or whatever. And nobody's really taught how to do that. I think it's quite unfortunate.
I actually now in South by Southwest, I was talking, I was networking one night, and a woman actually said that she lives in Manhattan, which basically means everything is difficult, and because she has to apply and send in an essay for her child to go to preschool. So she literally had to apply. Now, I don't know how a preschooler can write an essay, but whatever. And she used Chat GPT to write the entire essay, and she submitted it, and the kid got in. So great lesson to like teach them at a young age how to cheat. But I mean,
I don't really think it's cheating, by the way, but I'm not sure it's a great strategy for everybody, but as a starting point, it's a fantastic idea, and I think we should take advantage of it.
It's
by
creative.
the way, some people call that festival you just went to South by, but I'm so cool, I just call it by.
Well, I just call it South. No, I also call it, I just call it X. But yeah, so I love going. I love going every year, and actually there was a great session that Axios hosted on AI. One of the things that really caught my AI, was that there is a company that literally can create legitimate and I would say legitimate deepfakes. I mean, that's what they're working on for many reasons, for many legitimate reasons. But they actually, the CEO of the company, I'm going to try and have him on at some point, spoke about how they are leaning into regulation, and they're pushing the government to regulate. Otherwise, things go out of control. And what really was crazy was the report at Axios asked, like, have they been receptive, and how have they, kind of welcomed this? And he basically said they went into several senators' offices, showing them deep fakes of themselves out of context. And boy, oh boy, did that get their attention.
I'll bet. Yeah. I mean, it's quite unfortunate. I think the lack of awareness and action on the part of the US government. Europe is way ahead of us in that regard. But even Europe, I think, needs to move even faster on the regulatory front in this regard. As somebody, I was listening to a podcast the other day by Sam Harris, who said, this could be a thermonuclear bomb of misinformation, these generative AI capabilities like ChatGPT.
Wow. And of course, Elon Musk was very outspoken against AI. I don't know if he's changed his tune much. He seems to be too focused on Twitter trolls and blue check marks. But I remember his quote very early on, basically saying, beware and be warned. This is the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I must confess that I couldn't understand why that was true, because I'm an optimist about these things, and I work with a lot of companies, and nobody was doing anything dastardly. But having seen some of the things that these generative technologies have come up with makes me certainly more concerned, and certainly aware of the need for more regulation.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a moment. I want to talk about what got my attention, which is, pun intended and not intended, which is what I believe is to be one of the most seminal books in the space, which is The Attention Economy. And it was at a time when it actually became almost in vogue at the time to have a book plus the word economy, the experience economy, the entertainment economy, the attention economy. And I bought them all way back when. I know that we're going to segue and talk a lot about AI, but I would love to, now that I'm talking to the source, now that you look back, 2001, why did you write this book? What did you see? Why did you see the need to define and produce such a great piece of work? And then kind of fast forward, here we are, Here we are 20 odd years later, 22 years later. Could you have imagined how the world would change from the time you wrote this book, or did you actually foresee it?
Yes, I foresaw every detail, Joseph. I knew exactly what was going to happen.
You see? That is
Um,
called a softball, my friend.
yeah. Well, one detail that I did not foresee well at all was the really bad timing of the launch of this book. I was doing promotions for this book on the morning of September 11th, 2001.
Wow.
And the book had technically been launched the day before. And it turned out that was not a terribly good time to launch any sort of book. And somehow the world's attention went to topics other than my new book. So yes, it was quite unfortunate timing that I did not foresee.
I mean, that's obviously over the last 3 years in particular, I started the show March, or probably March 16th, 2020. Gee, I wonder what happened then. And at the time, there were several authors on the show coming on that were writing books, finishing books, launching books. They had to completely rethink their whole go-to-market strategy. And today, we see creative things. My friend Mark Schaefer, who's written a whole bunch of books, just sent a jigsaw puzzle with a photo of the two of us in it, and so there's a lot of great creative go-to-market strategy, but for the most part, it's pretty hard getting anyone's attention when it comes to books these days. But go for it, Tom, and then I'd just love to hear kind of the thesis on the book then,
Sure.
and then this idea of now fast forward, kind of reflecting on it 20 plus years later.
Yeah, well, I think that period, the internet had basically just become popular, and it was pretty clear that it was going to send a vast amount of information to almost everyone, and that our, attention was not going to be able to keep up with the demand for it. So we were all going to either live in an environment, as one person called it, an environment of continuous partial attention, or we were going to have to get very good at allocating our attention to the topics that really matter. And of course, things have gotten much worse then in terms of the information flow. And I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of people have gone to the continuous partial attention route, and they don't really think carefully about how their attention is allocated. They sort of look at little bits and pieces of information without really thinking carefully about how important is this, how accurate is it something that I should really do something about? And so in a way, I think we were relatively naive in 2001 about just how bad this problem would become. And maybe naive that people would become thoughtful and careful in the use of their attention. That doesn't seem to be really a common human trait.
It's very interesting because, it makes me think of the saying, jack of all trades and master of none, that because of this continuous impartial attention, we are just we're not even becoming generalists at all. We're becoming very average and mediocre attention payers. And but there were always opportunities. I mean, we won't even get into fact checking and accuracy, which we will later with Chat GPT. But it seems like, in fact, this morning we were talking about the Pomodoro effect in the collective cafe, and how what we need to do is we need to now push ourselves and challenge ourselves to prioritize exactly that point, prioritize attention and focus on quality. Even if it is 5 or 10 minutes a day, just making sure that when we are deep in thought, when we are creating, when we really are focusing on the high value tasks, that there are as the good kind of the bad kind of distractions. There are, because of course you talk about the good kinds of distractions like competitors, etc., and not being in a bubble. But I think it's just, it just seems like from a productivity standpoint, from a work-life balance standpoint, from a multitasking standard, that we need more tools and more techniques in order to survive.
I think that's true. And a lot of it, I think, will just mean, in the same sense, if we want to lose weight, you sort of push yourself away from the table. It's pushing ourselves away from some of these sources that we realize are not really doing us much good. That, maybe they provide a little shot of dopamine. And I think that, that's really what attention is all about. It's sort of, we pay attention to things that give our brains little shots of dopamine. But drugs do the same thing, and most people who get addicted to drugs realize this is not terribly good for them, and some are successful in pushing themselves away and some aren't. We have to push ourselves away, for example, from social media sites that make us feel bad about ourselves. And we now are quite aware that, for example, teenagers, particularly teenage girls, generally end up feeling much worse about themselves if they pay a lot of attention to social media. And I don't know why we are thus far unable to say, well, get off of Facebook. I don't use Twitter for the same reason. I used it for a while, and I found out that it annoyed me and was kind of turning me into my best self when I would react to what people said. So now I kind of try to market my own ideas, but I never really look at how people respond to it, because I just don't think it's conducive to, thoughtful, intelligent responses. And that's what we have to do. We have to make choices about where our attention is going to go that maximize our well-being.
And it's kind of brain candy, right? If you eat too much candy, it rots your brain. And of course, as you say, what it turned you into. So from my perspective, it turned you into T-Dave, as far as I'm concerned, because you are T-Dave. So it sounds like you're I don't know, like a rapper or, very cool guy on Twitter, T-Dave. I want to hang out with T-Dave. And if
well, I actually think that turned out to be a bad Twitter handle, because nobody knows what it is supposed to mean or connects it with me. I think had I been more knowledgeable about it, I would have just used my name.
You probably could have even been Tom, or but I like T-Dave. It's definitely working for me. Now, the idea of pushing away, right? You push off against an enemy, you push off against something, but pushing away is clearly a conscious effort. As parents, we are trying to focus on parental controls and making those decisions for our kids. I think obviously from a self-regulatory standpoint, we hope that we hope ourselves can push away and find the time to unplug or detox, etc. It's a real problem. I wonder if in your professional dealings and even academic dealings, if there is a point of view on responsibility that the players or that the providers need to play, the Apples, the Googles of the world, to do more, to actually recognize that they, quite frankly, have created a monster. And at some point, money has to be the secondary priority when we think about the long-term mental effects and mental health effects that I don't know that any of us have fully quite become aware of.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that we have a business model on the internet that rewards looking at advertisements, and so the more time you spend on these sites, be they TikTok or Google or whatever, the more money the organization makes. So I think again, that might require regulatory changes, but aligning the sort of economic incentives of these sites with the incentives for physical and mental health makes a lot more sense. In my new book, All In on AI, we talk about various things you can do with AI. But one is to sort of change customer behavior. And we've seen that happen in a big way with social media sites, mostly in a negative direction. But in the book, we talk about mostly insurance companies, health insurance companies, car insurance companies that are saying, hold it, it's not just our job to pay when somebody gets sick. Maybe we can make people healthier. And that incentive is aligned with their economics, because then they have to pay out less money, but it also makes their customer healthier. Progressive insurance is known for pioneering this idea that we would charge you more if you're a bad driver. But what's, I think, not as well known is that they also let you know that you're a bad driver and give you opportunities to become a better driver. So I think we need more of that kind of thing, and I'd love to see the social media companies move in that direction.
Right. So there's big data, and in Built to Suck, I think I have a little section that's called Big Data, Big Dummy. And the other way that I've my other phrase is, you can't automate stupid. So with all the data in the world, it's not going to make us more intelligent if we don't actually ask the right questions, if we don't know how to interpret the data, if we don't know how to weave that straw into gold. And it does make me think of IBM with Watson years and years ago, probably already at the dawn of back to 2001, being able to come up with these machine-powered insights. Like, for example, Pete Sampras, he wins 82% of his first serves, but only 43% of his second serves. And when you start to actually mine that data, it becomes kind of fascinating when you find patterns and you find anomalies and just I would say unexpected data points.
Yeah, I mean, that's really driven the transformation of professional sports, and now college and even high school sports teams are using analytics. It doesn't always mean that the game gets better as a result. But, if you look in professional basketball, every team now has realized that the expected value of a three-point shot is much higher than the expected value, inside the three-point line. A little higher risk of missing outside the three-point line, but the extra point makes for a higher expected value in point totals overall. So, all these professional basketball players are just sort of gunning from the outside now and not really doing the great plays that we used to see. In the same sense, in baseball, people realize that moving players around to different parts of the field made it much more likely that they'd actually catch the hit balls. So it just doesn't really feel like baseball anymore. So we have to, just as the baseball, Major League Baseball has decided, no, you're going to have to go back to where the shortstop used to play. We need to have some regulatory action by the government or by the league or whatever that says, we're going to take the benefits of these analytical and big data insights, but we're not going to transform the game in a negative direction.
And it also makes me think of, obviously, maybe one of the most interesting departures where data and analytics powered World Series success was Moneyball. And now they have XG in English football or football soccer, expected goals. So these are very interesting data points. Of course, a lot of kids are using these data points to try and figure out how to bet and make some money as well on sports. So it's just interesting how it's all evolved. Tom, I decided to go to Chat GPT and talk about use cases and ask Chat GPT to come up with a bio for you, a 100-word bio. And I'm going to try and share my screen and kind of show you a little bit of the story so far. But first of all, so essentially what I did was I started off by saying I need a 100-word bio to introduce Tom Davenport. And I'd like each word to begin with the letters of the alphabet in alphabetical order, except, of course, for Tom Davenport's name. So I ended up with astute business consultant. Davenport deftly directs effective enterprise-focused guidance. He inspires knowledgeable leadership, merging nuanced organizational practices, partnering with quality researchers. Tom's unique vision wields expansive expertise, yielding zealously actionable business insights.
Pretty impressive. I don't know about zealously actionable, but otherwise it's a pretty impressive formulation. But to get to some of the downsides of this very clever tool, I don't know if GPT-4, I haven't checked in GPT-4, but in GPT-3, it also said that I invented the electric motor in 1834. Thomas
you didn't?
Thomas Davenport did invent the electric motor in 1834, but that was not me. I'm sorry to say.
You also invented the time machine, apparently.
Exactly.
So I would take credit for it. I'd be like, you're damn right I invented the electric motor. So I went back and I actually said, well, I need a 100-word bio to introduce Tom Davenport, and I said the thing, and I said, when you get to Z start again, we managed to move to 100 words probably, but he started it just kind of derailed, and so then I tried again, and then I said, why did you stop using the alphabet? And my response was, I apologize for the confusion as an AI, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, I want you to maintain the alphabetical constraints and use A to Z and then repeat if necessary. And we actually ended up in a whole conversation. Bottom line was still couldn't quite get there in many respects. And I wonder whether it was maybe less about machine error. And maybe if I'd asked the question differently, or prompted differently, we would have ended up with a different result. But it was kind of an interesting exercise.
Yeah, and one of the scary things about ChatGPT and all of these very large language models is we have no idea why it does what it does. OpenAI is not really revealing how many parameters there are in GPT-4. But in GPT-3, there were 175 billion parameters of the model that generates these ideas. So even the smartest data science practitioner in the world couldn't go into ChatGPT and say, why did it come up? Which of the 175 billion parameters was responsible for dropping that alphabetical approach that it used at the beginning? So, we generally are wary of things that we can't explain, and will probably never be able to explain models like this one. It's just way too complex, and they're getting more complex all the time.
I went and what got my attention in LinkedIn the other day, and to your point, I think to your point, Twitter will rot your brain. LinkedIn is a much better source for intelligence and insight. And so I just want to share with you this article that did get my attention, talking about some use cases for and with ChatGPT-4, and just thought maybe it'd be interesting to have you kind of comment on them and maybe some other use cases. So GPT-4 can turn a napkin sketch into a fully functional website. In other words, it can go from developer docs as input to making functional apps. And I think this is also using the what do you call it, computer, not machine learning, but computer vision in terms of now visual and audio inputs. So I can keep going, but if you want to jump in at any point in time.
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things about GPT-4 as compared to some of its predecessors is the sort of, I don't know, what would you call it, channel cross media kinds of capabilities that it has. So one of the things that OpenAI showed in the introduction video was that it could look at the food in your refrigerator and do image recognition of what those foods were, and then give you recipes based on using those particular foods. So, in a way, we used to call it, I think, synesthesia, when your senses would kind of cut across when somebody would tell you a word and you would see colors or something like that as a result. I think all of the different media in which we express ourselves are going to get interlinked, and it's going to open up, I think, a lot of creativity on the positive side. Who knows, it'll probably drive some people crazy, but I think it's one of the really appealing things about this new technology.
It almost seems like that was just a little hat tip or nod to Sam Harris. He also spends a lot of time showing us how we can hear colors and see sounds. But that's another story for another day.
I do like Sam Harris, but I haven't heard that particular focus of his. I know he dropped Twitter, so that's one thing I admire about him. Yeah.
So you are speaking about the creative process. You penned this article in HBR, how generative AI is changing creative work, and you highlight these four opportunities: automated content generation, improved content quality, increased content variety, and personalized content. I would love for you to chat a bit about this, and also may as well address the quintessential elephant in the room, which is this idea of are our jobs going away? Which of our jobs are the machines coming for and gunning for? And it's interesting, Tom. I'll just say this as a backdrop. This is not the first time that we've looked at, for example, the toll booth operator, automation, digitization, replacing old jobs, and then, of course, but also offering all of these new jobs and opportunities. So I'd love for you to talk about the creative process. And then also, of course, the second part is, which jobs are going away and which jobs are not.
Sure. By the way, that article that you showed in Harvard Business Review was the only article ever written about generative AI. So that's why it's gotten so much attention. I'm just kidding. It was.
Yeah, I was going to be like, I'm sure I could generate a new one in about 5 seconds if I.
It was the first in HBR, but it was totally flooded by, I don't know, probably hundreds of thousands of articles in the media about ChatGPT, which came out a couple of weeks later. So we should have been more attention getting, I suppose. And I thought I was being so clever by having GPT-3 generate some of the text at the beginning. But now I know that's the world's biggest cliche in an article too, to have some of it artificially generated. In any case, yeah, I'm really interested in this technology. I think it certainly has a lot of long-term effects that we can't really fully understand. But you can already see some of the impacts, which is that writing first drafts is not going to be a highly valued skill anymore, because ChatGPT and its successors are going to be better at that than we are. So in the short run, I think one change is that we all have to become editors. We all have to become prompters. We're at the beginning and the end of the process, and there's something much more powerful than the human brain in the middle, but we still need the human brain. So we have to figure out what is the prompt that elicits the kind of output that we want. And that's going to take some training on our parts. It's not going to become intuitive anytime soon. And then after the system does its work, we have to look at the output and say, yeah, there's some good ideas here, but there's a lack of novelty, or, in the case of that Harvard Business Review article, it created a bulleted list or numbered list in the first paragraph of the article. And, that's not the way you introduce a new topic. So we have to become good editors. Unfortunately, right now, many of us are not taught how to edit. We have a lot more good first draft writers than we do good editors, but I think that needs to become a skill that's taught in school. And by the way, I would argue that all schools should encourage kids to try out these technologies and, of course, tell their teachers when they've written something that was assisted by a generative AI system, but learn how to make it more effective and make themselves more productive in the process.
I've decided that maybe the death of the editor, but there's now a new job, and so when I apply to John Wiley and Sons, now look out for my new title, which is Joseph Jaffe Senior Prompter, John Wiley and Sons. I love it, the prompter.
Yeah, prompt engineer, prompter.
Prompt engineer. Well, and also, if you're always on time, then you're a prompt engineer. There you go.
As well. A lot of people think this is going to be the big new job of the next decade or two. My own feeling is that we can probably teach systems to suggest prompts as well, and suggest improvements in your prompt if you aren't getting what you want. So I'm not sure that will last as a job. But right now, it seems to be not only popular but also high paying. I heard people getting $250,000 as a prompt engineer.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I'm just gonna let that one sink in for a moment and submit my resume on LinkedIn careers to as we speak. It also dawns on me. So if you think about the copywriter, right? The copywriter, is the advertising copywriter out of business? I mean, let me just ask the question like flat out.
Well, I think there will be a need for far fewer of them. Let's face it, most advertising copy is not very novel or interesting, and
that's true.
Generative technologies can do that much better than humans can. There will be, I think, a need for someone to come up with entirely novel approaches to advertising and marketing and every other field that GPT and its successors will not be able to do, because they're trained on past approaches to this. So if nobody's ever done anything like what you're doing, you're not going to find it in GPT. But novelty is rare, and most ad copywriting has been commoditized. And so I think we will see definite job changes in this regard. These generative tools are, I think, the biggest threat to knowledge workers that we've ever seen. But so far, all these previous AI technologies have not really had much of an impact on employment. They have eliminated some jobs, although mostly individual tasks within jobs. Maybe I'm not that familiar with what copywriters do, but maybe they do other things in addition to writing copy. Maybe they, I don't know, give feedback to the product developers, or I don't know what all the tasks are. But most people do more than one task in their job, and typically AI does only one task. These generative technologies are coming closer to being artificial general intelligence, but it's pretty clear they are not yet sentient. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing it. and they're not able to come up with novel approaches to anything. So I think we're safe still for a while. When the singularity happens and AI is better than us at everything, kind of all bets are off.
Listen, I've watched the performance of members of Congress. They don't know what they're doing either. So, but at least we know the pod bay doors, hell, open the pod bay doors, hell. We HELL. We might be a little bit away. You know, the other thing, just to say very quickly, Tom, is that I was thinking about this idea of, as I said earlier, perfectly imperfect or imperfectly perfect, that we'll be able to actually say to Chat GPT, write an essay or write a piece with a few spelling mistakes, or, you know, or one that we'll be able to actually say, write something that isn't going to alert my professor that I've used a chatbot. Or, you know, so even just the ability to bring in our flaws will be something that, with the right prompts and the right learning, the machine will be able to be one step ahead. And that's scary.
Yeah. And as you suggest, I think that would be much easier than writing my bio, starting each word with a letter of the alphabet, or writing in iambic pentameter, which these tools are quite good at. So injecting some errors is certainly quite possible, I think. You know, there are already tools that will identify whether something has been written by generative AI or not. And I think we're going to be facing sort of war games going back and forth between systems that create this kind of content and systems that detect that it's been artificially written. But, you know, I think it's kind of like, I view it as calculators. None of us really need to be that good at long division anymore. Calculators are not going away. And so we might as well get used to this technology and figure out how to use it effectively, because the people who can are going to be much more effective in their and productive in their work.
Well, I would say that Tom Davenport's next book is going to be called AI, Get Used to It, as opposed to All In on AI. But one thing that you have given advice, and this is another piece that you wrote, is, you know, do this properly. You know, as the book suggests, all in. Stop tinkering. Stop testing the waters, dipping your toes in the water. You know, brands and corporates are very, very good at test, learn, evolve, but it's never sufficient. It's always just enough to put that check on the to-do checklist. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what advice you would give to companies out there in terms of, you know, going all in. What does that mean, even going all in? Does it mean bet the farm, or does it just mean, well, hey, whatever you do, do it properly?
Well, it means stop just experimenting. You know, we're way beyond experimentation with AI. This is the most transformative technology that we've seen in probably 100 years. A number of people have equated it to electricity. So it's clearly going to transform much of what we do, and already is for leading adopters. So tinkering around the margins, doing little pilots and prototypes and proofs of concept and so on isn't going to get you there. And in fact, you know, you'll be like the textile manufacturer that's still using water power rather than electricity. And, you know, we also know, I live in the Boston area at least part of the time, and we had these textile mills. When electricity did come, they put a big rotating shaft down the middle of the building with all these belts to individual textile machines. They would have been much better off if they'd redesigned their whole process around this new technology from the beginning. And that's what smart companies are doing with AI.
I did want to just make a note that, especially I think points 7 through 9, create an AI governance and leadership structure leading into develop and staff centers of excellence, and then finally invest continually. There are clearly those messages. It's a 1, 2, 3 punch triple threat saying you've got to invest. You've got to create the processes, the resources. This has to be continuous. It cannot just be a one-off tactic in search of a strategy. This must become part of your organizational and cultural DNA.
Right. It's interesting. I've been around this field for a while, and I sometimes find it interesting when companies say, oh, we're going through digital transformation. And I often want to say, yeah, companies have been going through digital transformation as long as I've been working, which is 45 years or so now. And it's the companies that started it early and continued it and invest all the time are the ones that really went out, not the ones that say, oh, we're going to have a 2-year digital transformation initiative.
Yeah, and I mean the maybe your next article will be called "The Early Bird Gets the Bot," but it's true, and now during these tough times, these economic times, recessionary times, you see so many companies pulling back instead of pushing forward and really, again, investing in the future. I wanted to also just end off with going back to that LinkedIn piece that I found, because I found it fascinating. The newest version of ChatGPT can now do drug discovery. Give it a currently available drug, and it can find compounds with similar properties. Yeah, this is not going to end badly. Modify them to make sure they're not patented, etc.
What could go wrong, Joseph?
I know, exactly. We're doomed. Elon was right. It can do smart contract audits in seconds with respect to NFT collections. Someone who had no experience coding with coding made a Google Chrome extension in a few hours. You can recreate the game of Pong in under 60 seconds in just a few attempts. Do you notice that there's no T in the word attempts? I mean, and finally, I think this is final. Do not pay is using GPT-4 to generate lawsuits and legal action against robocallers. With it, you can generate one-click lawsuits. It's like Amazon, one-click lawsuits to sue robocallers. Oh, sorry, one more. OpenAI's GPT hired a gig worker to help it get around a captcha and then lied to the worker about why. So,
ay.
is right.
It is. I think there's a lot of scary stuff going on in this area. I think it's a little bit unfortunate that the vendors have decided that they're going to make all of us guinea pigs in the use of this technology rather than testing it, refining it, removing some of the hallucinatory capabilities that these systems have. Supposedly GPT-4 is 40% less hallucinatory than GPT-3 was, but still it's not to be trusted. And so it's a brave new world that we're launching into here, but ignoring it is not going to help. I often say the only people who are going to lose their jobs to AI are those who refuse to work with AI. So we don't have any choice to put our heads in the sand and pretend that this stuff doesn't exist. We do need better regulation. We do need better governance within organizations, but we've got to adopt it and experiment with it.
It's a perfect segue for the quote of the episode, and recognizing I always do call out when I'm showing signs of narcissism, because this is actually my own quote. And normally I try not to quote myself or talk to myself or answer back or even listen to myself. God knows there are a lot of voices inside the head. But this is actually something that I wrote. I said, don't pay for attention, pay attention. And I feel like it brings us full circle. Even when we see on face value, anything we read, anything we see, even images, video, you spoke about this idea and you said novelty is rare. Well, guess what? Common sense is more rare or rarer. So don't pay for attention, pay attention. Even that little spelling mistake in that LinkedIn carousel, if we're not paying attention, we will miss and we will miss out. And I think distinguished Professor Tom Davenport has reminded us that the only people that really will lose at the end of the day are the people that A, are not paying attention, and B, are not actually moving forward proactively and doing something about it. Start off by buying the book, damn it. It's called All In on AI. Go in and download the articles. Follow T. Dave on the Twitter, and and find out if he's going to be, I don't know, accepted by Harvard a sixth time. They keep coming back for more.
I don't know, Joseph. I'm running out of time on that. I may have reached my limit.
Well, not if you don't use ChatGPT 5 to write your entrance exam. It really was, personally for me, an absolute pleasure, to come face to face with someone that I admire, and a book that, for me, has informed my own journey into, I guess now, thanks to the fact that authors are going to be put out of business, oblivion, but still, it was fun while it lasted. And I leave you with a Chat GPT generated Chuck Norris that had this to say about you.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
Okay.
And we will be back soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.